homies with Drake. You know what I'm saying? And
You guys had music together.
Drake is like a brother to me. You know what I'm saying? And so when they had that beef.
What? Diddy just slapped Drake. Like, where at?
Slapped or punched?
I heard a slap. He slapped Drake. He was like behind the scenes behind.
Like, what made you put hands on Drake?
I did not put hands on Drake.
Oh.
And I do not want any problems with Drake. Drake is, right now.
What if I told you that one of the biggest stars in music almost got taken out before his career even peaked? That whispers in Los Angeles claimed Drake was being lined up with powerful names behind the scenes pulling the strings. And here's the twist. The man who might have saved him wasn't a bodyguard, wasn't a record label executive, but another rapper. And not just any rapper. A certified legend who had been warning Drake from day one that this industry plays dirtier than anyone realizes. Because when you peel back the surface, this wasn't just a small beef over a beat. This was about power, influence, and the kind of games that can end careers or lives. From coded lyrics hidden in Jay-Z's verses, to rumors of Diddy's alleged moves against Drake, the deeper you dig, the crazier it gets. And once you connect the dots, you'll see how one mentor's warnings may have been the only thing that kept Drake a step ahead in a dangerous game. But to understand how it all spiraled into one of the darkest hip-hop rumors of the last decade, we have to start at the very beginning, back when Jay-Z first placed his bet on a young Toronto kid with something to prove. Back in 2010, Drake was still the hungry newcomer from Toronto, breaking out of his rapper-turned-actor image and trying to prove he could stand among the giants. He already had Lil Wayne's stamp of approval through Young Money. But what happened next took things to another level. That same year, Jay-Z stepped in with a major cosign on Drake's debut studio album, Thank Me Later. Their track together, Light Up, wasn't just another feature. It was a statement. For many fans, it felt like a passing of the torch. Jay wasn't just another legend hopping on a record. He was positioning Drake as the next generation, someone worthy of carrying hip-hop's future. And over the years, Jay kept reinforcing that connection. 2013, he's on Pound Cake. 2018, he's on Talk Up. 2021, he's on Love All. It was like Jay kept checking in, reminding everyone that Drake wasn't just another star. He was someone Hav himself had his eye on. The dynamic was clear. Jay played the role of the mentor, the boss figure, while Drake was the student climbing fast. And Drake never hid that admiration. At one of his own shows, he even told fans about being a teenager in a Toronto parking lot. Watching Jay-Z perform for the first time, Drake admitted it flipped a switch in his head, made him realize the impossible was actually possible. But here's where things get interesting. While the public saw Jay as a mentor giving Drake guidance, some fans now believe Jay was doing more than just helping him sharpen his craft. They think Jay was leaving hidden warnings in his music, subliminals disguised as mentorship. And those warnings, they might have been aimed directly at the very mogul who would later become Drake's biggest threat. At first, most people heard Light Up as just another flex from Jay-Z. But looking back, some of those lines don't sound like rap anymore. They sound like coded advice. One of the most quoted bars goes, "Drake, here's how they're going to come at you. In disguise, in the form of a favor, watch for the traitors." Back in 2010, it felt like wordplay. Today, fans say it sounds like a straight-up warning. A message to Drake that once you reach the top, not every handshake is friendly, and not every offer comes without strings attached. People on forums have even gone back to decode it, saying Jay wasn't just talking about shady business deals. He was preparing Drake for setups, fake friends, and power moves disguised as help. In other words, he was telling him to keep his guard up, especially around certain industry moguls. And here's where the speculation goes into overdrive. Many fans believe Jay wasn't speaking in generalities at all. They claim he was pointing Drake directly toward one man, Diddy. Because just a few years later, everything Jay warned about seemed to play out in real time. The favors, the tension, the the betrayal, and eventually, the alleged confrontation that nearly blew up into something way darker. And when that day came, it wasn't just about music anymore. It was about survival. By 2014, Drake had transformed from promising newcomer to global superstar. His hits weren't just topping charts, they were shaping culture. But the higher he climbed, the sharper the knives became. The tension that had been simmering between Drake and Diddy finally boiled over that summer. The spark? A beat. But not just any beat. 0 to 100. The Ketchup, produced by Boy Wonder and Frank Dukes, one of the hardest tracks Drake had ever dropped. The problem? Diddy swore that beat was his. Word is, he had dibs on it for a project of his own. But Drake didn't wait around. He recorded it, released it, and the record exploded. To Diddy, that wasn't just disrespect, that was theft. Fast forward to December 8th, 2014. DJ Khaled's birthday bash in Miami. The room is packed with A-listers, champagne flowing, energy high. But behind the velvet ropes, things were tense. Sources claim Diddy wasn't there to celebrate. He was there to confront Drake. And according to multiple insiders, that's exactly what happened. Diddy allegedly ran up on Drake, pressed him about the beat, and when Drake got slick with his words, Diddy slapped him. Some even say it was more than a slap, that he landed a punch and told Drake, "You'll never disrespect me again." The news spread like wildfire. Calls at 4 a.m., whispers in industry circles. Everyone had their own version of the story, but one thing was clear. This was no longer about a beat. This was about power, ego, and respect. Even 50 Cent couldn't resist chiming in. He clowned Diddy publicly, saying Puff couldn't even hear a hit until Drake put it out. And that's why he was so mad. To 50, it wasn't about music. It was about jealousy. And just when it seemed like a standard industry beef, things started to turn darker. Because whispers began circulating that Diddy wasn't done. That Miami wasn't the end of it, just the beginning. After the Miami incident, most people assumed the beef had peaked. A slap in the club, some bruised egos, and eventually, the industry would move on. But according to the whispers in Los Angeles, things didn't just cool off, they escalated. Behind the scenes, rumors swirled that Diddy wasn't finished with Drake. Word spread that he had allegedly put a price on Drake's head, a so-called bounty, for anyone who could catch him slipping in LA. No footage, no paperwork, just whispers. But in an industry where rumors can get people hurt, that was enough to set off alarms. That's when another name entered the story. The Game. A Compton heavyweight, deeply connected in LA, respected in the streets. And according to insiders, when Game caught wind of the whispers, he didn't hesitate. He reached out directly to Drake, letting him know eyes were on him and that he'd keep him safe while he was on the West Coast. The Game later admitted that people had hit him up, trying to line Drake up, even asking him to take part. Instead of green-lighting it, he flipped the script. He gave Drake protection, not pressure. He made it clear that as long as Drake was under his wing, no one in LA was going to touch him. But here's the thing about protection in the streets. It's never free. Every favor has a price. And when you look at what happened next, it seems like Drake understood that perfectly. Because instead of just saying thank you, he gave the Game something worth way more. Drake knew better than anyone that in Los Angeles, protection isn't charity, it's business. And when the Game stepped in to shield him from those alleged whispers, Drake found a way to repay the favor, not with money, but with music. Not long after, the two linked up on the track 100. On the surface, it looked like just another rap collab. But when you look closer, it was much more than that. Drake didn't just drop a verse. He handed the Game a record that had all the makings of a hit. And he didn't stop there. Drake brought his own crew, his own resources, and they filmed the video right in Compton, Game's home turf. Shooting in the neighborhood wasn't just about visuals. It was a stamp, a public show of solidarity. Drake wasn't just collaborating, he was aligning himself with Compton, with Game, with real street credibility. Insiders say that was no coincidence. It was a calculated move. That record wasn't just for the charts, it was currency. A way for Drake to show respect, settle debts, and send a clear message to anyone watching. I'm not alone out here. For the Game, it was a win too. He got one of the hottest artists in the world to deliver a record straight into his hands, free of charge. And for Drake, it meant safety, leverage, and proof that he could handle himself in a city where clout only gets you so far. But even with the deal sealed, the streets don't always play by the rules. And during that very same video shoot, things nearly went left, pushing Drake's paranoia to the breaking point. The Compton video shoot for 100 was supposed to be the celebration of a new alliance. Drake and the Game, side by side, locking in one of the hardest records of the year. Cameras rolling, the neighborhood watching, everything felt stamped and official. But if there's one thing about Los Angeles, it's that energy can switch in an instant. And for Drake, that moment came fast. According to Whack 100, who was on the scene that day, Drake suddenly spotted unfamiliar faces moving around the set. Random guys he didn't recognize, walking through the crowd, watching from a distance. To most people, it was nothing. But for Drake, with those whispers of a bounty still hanging in the air, it was everything. Panic hit. Drake thought it was a setup, that the rumors had caught up to him and the people standing just feet away weren't extras, but shooters. No questions asked, he bolted. Took off from the shoot, convinced the hit was about to go down. But here's the twist. Those unfamiliar faces. They weren't enemies. They were Game's people, there for security, not sabotage. They were there to clear the block, to make sure the shoot stayed safe. Whack later said they had to send someone after Drake, calm him down, and bring him back to finish the video. A reminder that in LA, paranoia is survival, and sometimes the line between friend and foe is razor thin. The video wrapped, the record dropped, and on the surface everything looked fine. But underneath, Drake had learned a lesson the hard way. Once those whispers start, it doesn't matter how much protection you've got. The fear follows you everywhere. And while things seemed to cool off in public, behind the scenes, the tension between Drake and Diddy never really disappeared. After the chaos, it looked like things finally cooled down. In public, Drake and Diddy even seemed to squash their beef. They were spotted at events together, sometimes even laughing like nothing had ever gone down. French Montana even played the role of peacemaker, claiming he helped smooth things over between the two. But anyone paying close attention knew this wasn't the full story. That peace was more of a handshake for the cameras than a real reconciliation. Industry insiders whispered that Diddy still felt slighted. To him, Drake wasn't just another rapper. He was the guy who'd walked away with a track Diddy believed was meant for him. Add in the nightclub punch, and the embarrassment was hard to erase. Even if they smiled in public, the sting behind closed doors never really faded. On Drake's side, the paranoia lingered too. He knew how much power Diddy held, not just in music, but in the streets. Even if the so-called beef was over, Drake couldn't be sure if the tension was truly dead or just buried under the surface, waiting to spark again. Fans picked up on it too. Every time Drake dropped a new bar that sounded remotely like a shot, blogs lit up with speculation. Was that aimed at Diddy? Every time Diddy's name came up in interviews, the body language was analyzed, the tone picked apart. It was as if the industry itself knew the piece was fragile, and one wrong move could bring it all crashing back. And sure enough, new allegations about Diddy's private life would soon resurface, dragging Drake's name right back into the storm. When Cassie's name started floating around, the tension between Diddy and Drake took on an entirely different weight. Cassie had been tied to Diddy for years, seen by many as his longtime partner, even though their relationship was often kept vague in public. But whispers in the industry suggested Drake and Cassie might have had their own connection. Whether real or just speculation, it was enough to make things messy. The timing was what made it explosive. Just as Drake and Diddy's feud was cooling off, rumors began swirling that Cassie was hanging out with Drake. Photos, party sightings, and the kind of social media hints that fans obsess over only made the talk louder. For Diddy, this wasn't just about music anymore. If there was any truth to the speculation, it meant one of the most powerful men in hip-hop was being embarrassed on a personal level. And that's the kind of thing that doesn't get forgiven easily. Some even claimed this was the real fuel behind the infamous Miami altercation, that it wasn't just about a beat, but about respect. Because in Diddy's world, losing out on a hit record might sting, but being seen as losing his girl, that was unforgivable. Drake, meanwhile, never addressed the Cassie rumors directly. He let the speculation swirl, maybe because he knew denying it would only give the story more legs. But in the court of public opinion, the damage was done. Drake was being painted as the guy who not only outshined Diddy musically, but also crossed a line personally. And once Cassie eventually broke away from Diddy for good, fans looked back at those old whispers with fresh eyes. Suddenly, the idea that Drake might have been involved didn't seem so far-fetched. But as heavy as that chapter was, it wasn't the only storm circling Drake's name. Because when new lawsuits and shocking claims began hitting the headlines about Diddy's private life, people started asking, was Drake just caught in the crossfire, or was he one of the reasons those doors were getting kicked open? If there's one thing hip-hop thrives on, it's subliminals. And Drake and Diddy's tension didn't just play out in private, it bled straight into their music. Drake, known for weaving personal jabs into smooth verses, had lines that fans immediately tied back to Diddy. In tracks like Energy, and later in 4 p.m. in Calabasas, people swore he was firing at Puff. One lyric in particular, where Drake mocks an older legend dancing in the club instead of staying relevant, had listeners convinced he was painting Diddy's exact silhouette. But Diddy wasn't quiet either. On his side, he leaned into interviews and freestyle moments, dropping comments that seemed to poke at Drake's authenticity. He'd question whether certain rappers really earned their stripes or just had everything handed to them. Fans didn't need names. Everyone knew who he meant. And this is where Jay-Z's prophecy from years before started echoing louder. The warnings about traitors, about favors turning into traps, about being careful who you trust. Because while the world was watching the subliminals fly back and forth, those closest to the situation knew it wasn't just rap banter. It was real animosity spilling onto wax. Every verse, every interview, every Instagram caption felt like another chess move. And instead of cooling things down, it kept the story alive. Because the more people tried to decode the bars, the more it seemed like Drake and Diddy were locked in a cold war, one that could heat up at any second. And then, just when it looked like things were about to explode again, something happened that shifted the narrative entirely. If Drake thought time would put distance between him and Diddy, he was wrong. Because behind the scenes, another dynamic was making things even more complicated. Diddy and Jay-Z's alliance. The two moguls weren't just business partners, they were symbols of hip-hop's highest tier of power. Together, they moved like a unit, showing up at parties, cutting deals, and flexing their dominance over the culture. People started calling them peanut butter jelly. Two different flavors, but inseparable when it came to money and influence. And that was bad news for Drake. Because remember, Jay-Z had already sent cryptic warnings about traitors and young kings forgetting their place. If Hov saw Drake as a threat, and Diddy still felt slighted, then Drake was essentially boxed in by two of the industry's most powerful figures. Fans noticed the tension too. Whenever Jay-Z threw a subtle jab on a record, like calling out rookies or flash-in-the-pan stars, people linked it to Drake. And when Diddy chimed in with his own dismissive comments, it only reinforced the idea that they were playing the long game against him. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about legacy, power, and control. Diddy and Jay-Z represented the old guard, the billionaires who had already claimed their thrones. Drake was the young superstar trying to carve his own empire. And in that clash, there was no room for everyone to win. But while Jay-Z and Diddy seemed untouchable together, the cracks were beginning to show. And it wouldn't be long before the peanut butter jelly partnership exposed its own vulnerabilities. From wild rumors of secret bounties, to the game stepping in as protector, to the whispers of Cassie's involvement, and the subliminal shots in music, Drake's entanglement with Diddy and Jay-Z has never been just another rap beef. It's a saga of power, influence, and survival inside an industry where the wrong enemy can change your entire trajectory. On the surface, things might look calm now. Drake continues to dominate charts. Jay-Z remains the blueprint for hip-hop wealth, and Diddy still flexes as a cultural icon. But the truth is, the scars from this feud run deep. The alliances, the betrayals, the whispered threats, none of that disappears just because the cameras aren't rolling. And with new lawsuits, new rumors, and new players constantly emerging, one has to wonder, is this story really over? Or are we only seeing the beginning of a much bigger storm? Because if history has shown us anything, it's that in hip-hop, peace is often just a pause before the next explosion. So the question is, when it comes to Drake, Jay-Z, and Diddy, what's really waiting beneath the surface?